Well, hello, friends and fellow pioneers. I have the pleasure to have here with me farmer, brother, friend, Mr. Joel Salatin with us today. Our journey of knowing about Joel's work began about 12 or 13 years ago when we moved back from Mexico. Jason was just ready to finally start pioneering and start putting our money and our time where our mouth was. We had been for 13 years talking about living a more sustainable life, and we finally were at a place where all of our intentions and all of our energy was we were ready to go, and we came across you can farm and everything I want to do is illegal, and it was so inspiring. One surprise I was not expecting to see or hear about in You Can Farm was the Salatin's experience that they had. Similar passion and dream that we have was to buy land and to set up a sustainable homestead in Venezuela. They did do that decades ago, and I would love to give Joel the opportunity to share about that pioneering journey, leaving the States, going to Venezuela, and the events that led to them having to return back and start from zero. So thank you so much, Joel, for opening, for this time that you're giving us to talk about this. And, you know, for those of us, you that don't know, I'm originally from Venezuela, and that's part of my extreme excitement about how this pioneering journey has a connection with Venezuela, and how Joel's family, the Salatins, did not let that setback stop them, how that actually fueled what God is doing in their lives today. And so thank you again, Joel, for joining us. I would
Sure.
love to hear just if you can share with us the beginning of that adventure of the pioneering journey. I know you were little, but what you can remember.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Aurora. It started long before I was born. So my dad was he was in the Navy in World War II, and after the Navy, so he wanted to he wanted to have a farm, but a Midwesterner, no family farm, no money. How do you do this? And in the 30s and when he was a little kid, there were these what were called big little books, and there were stories of those early explorers. During the 30s, there was a lot of exploration around the world. In the Pacific, the Dutch East Indies, in South America, the poles. Admiral Perry went to the pole, and so there was a lot of interest in that, and he was always ready to jump onto the new thing. He didn't like doing the same thing over and over again, so he got this idea. Well, I could go to South America and it's a new frontier kind of thing. The U.S. North America was already pretty well. There was no new frontier here. It was all pretty well inhabited, and the land was all divvied up. And so well, how can I afford a farm in South America? So he decided to be a bilingual accountant for an American company. At that time, it was Texas Oil Company, which became Texaco. And this was 1948. 48 was just the beginning of the big, petroleum boom off the coast of Venezuela, in off the Maracaibo and those areas. And so he after going to college on the GI Bill, getting a business administration degree, went to Middleburg in Vermont for a semester and got Spanish, and then hitchhiked from Vermont to Mexico, and spent 6 months in Mexico with a family, and boned up on his Spanish. So he came back then and sat for the Foreign Civil Service exam in Spanish and passed it the first go, and then got on as a bilingual accountant for Texas Oil Company. That was a very lucrative position at the time because the managers on these wildcat ventures, these they would have American managers, but then the hard work was done by the Venezuelans. And of course, the American managers spoke English and the Venezuelans spoke Spanish, and the friction always came up about money. payroll, company store, things at the man camp. They called it a man camp, where everybody lived. And so they wanted the person who handled the money to be a bilingual. And so it was a very specific niche job opportunity at the time. And so that's what he did. And so in 7 years, he was able to save up enough money to buy this 1,000-acre farm there in the highlands of Venezuela. And by that time, he'd married Mom, and they had met at Indiana University after World War II. And so it took her down, and they started farming. They came back to have each of us kids, not my sister, but my older brother and I. This was, Cold War, 1950s, McCarthyism. They didn't want to get, messed up with citizenship and all that. So they came back to have us, and it immediately went back. I went back at 6 weeks old. That was the youngest Pan American would let an infant, fly on an airplane. And so started raising chickens, and the idea was to have chickens and beef, and started raising chickens. Now, at that time, so this is mid 1950s. Of course, nobody had electricity at that time, and so the way the food economy, the food commerce happened, was if you lived in the city and you wanted chicken for dinner, you waited until the chicken man came with these chickens on a pole. You'd have them strung up on a pole, their feet up, and you'd look at those chickens and you pick the cleanest, nicest looking one. One of the big issues they had at that time was all the indigenous chickens had kind of a mucus discharge from kind of subclinical respiratory issues because they were raised in such unsanitary conditions. They just ran through the sewers and just ran wherever. They didn't, they weren't rotated around. And so we had ours on clean ground, rotated ground, protected. And so our chickens didn't have this mucus, this kind of subclinical, it was snot, it was mucus discharge out of the beak. And so the senora of La Casa, the home, she would take her finger and rub it down along the beak of the chicken to see if it had this nasal discharge. And of course, the drier, the cleaner the beak was, the healthier the chicken. And so that commanded a higher price. In those cultures, everything is negotiation, right? You don't put a price tag on a chicken. Everything is individually negotiated. And so the farmers would come with their chickens to the square, and then the vendors would buy from the farmers, and the vendors then would take it through town and sell to the homeowners. And what happened pretty quickly was Dad cornered the market for pollo, for local chickens, very quickly, because our chickens were clean. And of course, the other farmers in the community were not happy about it. They accused us of witchcraft and practicing voodoo, because those are the only ways that you could have chickens this clean, they thought. And instead of asking, how do you have chickens that clean, they assumed that we were into witchcraft and voodoo. And so there was a lot of animosity build up among the local farming community to our success, and the fact that we'd gotten the market so quickly and so efficiently. And so when the junta developed there in 1959 with the ouster of Pérez Jiménez, what happens when you have a junta or a coup in a culture, and you have even more lawlessness than normal, it gives license for some scores to be settled that might not have been settled under more normal times. And so we still don't know all the background of what happened. All we know is that the machine guns came in the front door, and we headed out the back door, and fled. Again, I don't know how much of this was that we were ugly American capitalist pigs, that were communist inspired, or whether, how much of it was the local farmers said, hey, we can get rid of these people now because there's nobody everything's out of control. We don't know what all the how much of that was on each side, but what we do know is we escaped with our lives and lost everything. And so Dad was 42 at the time and lost everything. So here we were, coming back to the U.S. We looked at every open door, every possibility, met with, the foreign minister, the interior minister, all these, and they were all scared they were going to be assassinated and everything was in turmoil. And so we couldn't get any protection at all. So the only thing to do was to come back to the States. And of course, very, very traumatic, very traumatic. Looking back on it now, Mom points out that what a blessing that was that happened to us, because if we had stayed and been very successful, then we would have still lost it under, Chavez or Maduro now. And I should say Maduro instead of Maduro. Maduro sounds like an anglicized. I'm very cognizant of the fact that I have the ability to speak like a native Spanish, and I say Maduro and Caracas, not Caracas. Okay, so I've lost the vocabulary, but I still have the inflection. Because I spoke Spanish before English. I was 4 years old when we fled, and I don't remember much of the farm. I remember some of the trauma of running away from guerrillas and things like that. I don't mean monkey guerrillas. I mean, rebel guerrillas. Came back to the U.S. and found this worn out, gullied rock pile here in Virginia. Dad was there 12 years. He loved the country. He loved the people. He loved the culture. And he lost his heart in Venezuela. He never recovered emotionally from that trauma. And that's why we settled here in Virginia rather than the Midwest, where both Mom and Dad were from, because he was hoping that when things settled down, we'd be able to go back. And as that turned out, we didn't. But that's why we came to Virginia rather than Ohio or Indiana, where both Mom and Dad were from. So that's how we ended up here. And interestingly, here, just to kind of put a little bit of a capstone on that story. So here we move in, and about 2 weeks after moving in, the Ku Klux Klan burned a bale of hay in the driveway, so that we would know that the community knew that we were communist spies. So why is that? So, well, see, our place here was bought in 1949 by a family from New Mexico. And of course, in our very conservative rural community, they don't realize that New Mexico is part of the U.S. It's certainly not back in the 1950s. So here in the late 40s. And this was McCarthyism, Cold War, right? And so here came this family from New Mexico. They were here for 4 years, sold it to a guy from Saudi Arabia who'd made money in oil exploration. Well, a guy he'd been in business with over in Saudi Arabia came and found him. The two they owed money, and so in the finishing up of the money situation, his other guy that he owed money to ended up with the farm. So now you think about it, you got 4 years from New Mexico, 4 years Saudi Arabia, 4 years Saudi Arabia. Here we come from Venezuela. Well, what's the term of foreign missions and foreign? It's 4 years. You got 4 years, you come back, right? 4 years, you come back. Foreign service, missionaries, they come back for deputation, that sort of thing. And so this 4 year cycle had come through. So by the time we came here from Venezuela, the community understood that this was actually a communist spy ring, and so that's why the Ku Klux Klan burned a bale of hay in the lane, so that we would know that the community knew what we were up to. You're not going to fool us. We've got you covered. And so that was our welcome wagon to the community, and here we are 61 years later.
Wow, that was way more incredible of a story than I expected. I love how your dad gained that resilience in um, learning at the beginning. Wow, he was just a go-getter for sure.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. And
Very much so. If there's one thing that I'm grateful for in my family legacy, uh, from dad and mom, it is that neither one of them was ever concerned about peer pressure, about what other people said. Obviously, both of their families thought they were crazy for going to Venezuela when they went. You're going to go down there and live with the monkeys, and yeah, and of course their parents were not happy. Oh, we're never going to see you or see the grandchildren, um, and so I come from this rich genetic stock of conviction and commitment. And if it's the right thing to do, we're going to do it. And it doesn't matter what anybody thinks, or what anybody says. Mom, to just picture her just a moment. Mom grew up in a very, very difficult home with an alcoholic father who abandoned she and her sister and mother very, very early in life. And in fact, my grandmother married 3 alcoholics in her life. She struck out on that score. Wonderful, wonderful lady, and spent the last decade of her life living with us here on the farm. And I got really, really close to my grandmother. She's the only grandparent I really ever knew. Again, because we were in Venezuela, I didn't see grandparents, right? So it was later, it was as a late teen that I finally had a relationship with one of my grandparents, and she was the only one. Anyway, so mom had this hatred of alcohol, and when she became a Christian late in high school, that just solidified it more for her. And so when she went to college, she was very smart and liked and all this. And so of course all the women's sororities wanted her to join their sorority. And of course the sororities were kind of a front organization for partying and drinking and carousing and whatever. And so she went to the administration and said, I want to start a women's sorority that doesn't have an alcohol free women's sorority. And she created quite a stir of this, so much so that in her college records, they labeled her as a troublemaker, that she didn't conform to everybody else's ideas and standards, that she was a troublemaker. And so I come from this kind of convictional commitment streak way back, and I'm very, very grateful for it.
that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I can relate to some of the things that I fought for actually in college when I had a really strong conviction. There's this new drawing or figure drawing requirement in the art department. And I tried to get people to rally with me that are fellow believers, but no one really wanted to fight for that. And so it came to my last semester, and I sat down with the department head and I said, well, I would rather leave this university with one class short of my degree than to lay my convictions down. And so I'm not doing it. I'm not taking it. So it's up to you. Do you want to let me just walk away with everything except the one class? And so everyone I knew and everyone he knew for decades had all surrendered to the fact that was the requirement. And so I felt very alone, but sometimes we have to.
Yes.
I wanted company in my conviction, but there was none. And then it just came to like, well, I'll just be the only one, and I'll be really sad for all the thousands that my, dad invested in me. He was in Venezuela at the time, converting dollars to let me get this university education. And I felt really bad for my dad when, invested in me all those 5 years and me walk away with no degree to show for it. But I wasn't going to sell out just because all of my peers and my professors thought that that you really didn't have to have conviction interfere with the common popular requirements. And that story of your grandmother is so inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. So someone just commented that they are just shocked also that your grandmother was called a troublemaker for wanting a non-drinking sorority. And that really is the times that we're living in now. You know, we're troublemakers.
Yes.
Wanting to do things naturally and to live the way that God intended and created for us to live. It doesn't make logical sense. But, you know, like your book says, everything I want to do is illegal and it's natural. It's good. And good became bad.
Yeah, you know, so, you know, for me growing up, you know, when I was in high school and got, you know, kind of taunted by the other students as, you know, chicken man, you know, and they'd make fun of you want to be a farmer and all this. You know, I'm so thankful that all of that, and even, you know, in college, then when I wanted to be a farmer and my, you know, and all my debate buddies, you know, so you're going to throw your life away, throw your brains away, throw away all this talent and everything. You know, they just didn't realize, thankfully for me, it was all, you know, whatever, you know, for me, I was heading this direction and you're not gonna dissuade me. And, we're going to make it happen somehow.
And we're so blessed really for all the pioneers in our lives, including you, for not bowing down, you know, and it's like how much someone said recently to us, like, how much do you start, you know, kneeling and bowing before you're all the way straight, you know, all the way fully into submitting yourself to something that you don't believe in, right? And
Right.
so the more that we have our convictions be 90 degrees erect, that is standing, and not just a little bit keeping comfort, all the people that are kneeling and bowing, that's not our calling, you know. And our calling is to be erect and show the way. A lighthouse is not even leaning. Generally, it's supposed to be erect and shining.
If it's leaning, it's probably got a problem somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly. And you know what, for your listeners, Aurora, I don't want to make it sound like I'm completely consistent. All of us have our little inconsistencies, and it's important to recognize that straight up. But we should certainly try to live with convictional intentionality, so that we are at least wrestling with these things. You know, for example, if you know my book, The Marvelous Pigness of Pigs, I talk in there about how you know, if I go into the average church and say, you know, maybe we shouldn't use styrofoam plates for the potluck. Maybe we ought to actually get dishes down there from the, you know, the thrift store, and let's wash them so we don't have any waste after the church potluck. If you dare to mention that in the average American church, you know, suddenly, what are you, some sort of a commie pinko greenie, tree hugging Gaia? You know, it's your stereotypical thing. And you know, I'm not going to say if you use styrofoam it's sinful. I am just saying, can we wrestle with it? Can we talk about what is pleasing to God? What is right for the earth, His creation, as stewards of it? Let's at least wrestle with the intentionality of what we're doing. But we, you know, we don't like to go there. We just as soon, you know, buy what everybody else is buying, eat what everybody else is eating, invest in what everybody else is investing, and we just you know, swim downstream, and it's pretty difficult. I mean, the you know, I love the name of your, you know, Pioneer, is your name here, because pioneers, by definition, pioneers swim against the stream, and that means if there's one trait that a pioneer has to have, it is that you can't be dependent on everybody else's expectations. I I mean, you have to have conviction, you have to have commitment, you have to know, what you're heading for. But my goodness, if you start listening to everybody else's voice, you will never be a pioneer.
That's so true, and I love that you use the word, that conviction is really the foundation. Conviction are the foundation to actually be able to do something of any real value, because you are unwavering going after that thing, that goal, or that vision that you feel like it's only for you to do. And I laughed because styrofoam is actually a huge conviction of mine. I cannot touch it. I just can't do it. Um, and it is a process. It's a process. I didn't really have as much of a conviction about styrofoam, but now it's very hard for me. It's actually nearly impossible for me to participate using styrofoam, knowing what it does to creation. And I think the more of those things that we have, that we understand, like you said, we're intentional about the conviction of what is the effect that that's going to have. We all, like you said, have a choice in what we invest in. And when we invest our time, our focus, and our attention, our money, we are voting. And it's either towards pioneer something that our convictions line up with, or somebody else's ideas, like you said. And that brings me to, I know that you were sharing how some of the struggles that your family had in that adventure of pioneering. And I love how, obviously, Venezuela is my home country, and how much love your dad had for the people. Jason also is very passionate. And it's been really heartbreaking to not be able to go back as often as we would like, and with the state of the world right now and the restrictions
Right.
that are.
Mm.
And not only that, but the state of the economy there, how it was brought to its knees. I would love for you to share with us maybe some less common or less popular stories that people know about that have been a struggle in your pioneering journey, that were setbacks that you had to overcome. Maybe some of those, one of the things that I share with, that I often share, is that resilience begins inside. And obviously, as we have that resilient conviction inside, then it leads us to act in resilient ways. But to be able to see a setback and say, well, this is just one more opportunity to gain that resilience muscle and move forward, because this is not going to stop me. Does anything come to mind with your families, especially the things that you can remember your family going through and developing the land? What were some of maybe those private moments that were in here and in here that you and your family had to make that choice to move forward and continue? I don't even want to say the word plowing, but continue
Right.
forward, pressing forward.
Yeah, continue developing what we were developing. So so when we came here, this place had been abused beyond. I mean, it was the armpit of the community. It was rocks and gullies, and it wouldn't support 10 cows. I mean, it was just pitiful. And Dad actually asked for counsel from agriculture experts, farm experts, both public and private, and said, okay, how do I make a living on this place? And Aurora, every single one of them, every single one was plant corn, buy chemical fertilizer, graze the woods, build silos, every bit of that. And my grandfather, Dad's dad, had been a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine when it first came out in 1948 or something like that. And so my grandfather had these, compost piles and this large garden, and so Dad got a stewardship ecology twist, if you will, from his dad. And so when all this advice came in about, buying chemical fertilizer, planting corn, grazing the woods, building silos, as an economist, Dad put chemical farming on a treadmill. That you're buying these inputs and you can't run fast enough to get away from it. He saw it basically like a drug addiction, and this, of course, was before the big drug wars of today, and so he didn't so he didn't do that, but at the same time we couldn't make a living on the farm. So he and Mom both worked off the farm. Mom, a school teacher. He was you did taxes for people and bookkeeping, accounting, and in 10 years, those off-farm incomes got us out of the mortgage. And here again, it was the mortgage was way longer than 10 years, but so first of all, the pressure of not borrowing more money. Secondly, the pressure of getting out of debt as fast as you can get out of debt. Most people would have said, well, look, just pay off just pay what you need to, and you'll have more money. But we hate debt, and I hate debt. And I mean, I don't think debt is sin. We're in debt right now. We bought the neighbor's 300 acres 2 years ago, so we've got a mortgage on that right now. But we've last year we paid 3 years worth of payments in 1 year. Now every business council would say, oh, just pay the minimal, because inflation and the dollars are cheaper, blah, blah, blah. No, we just don't like to be beholden. We like the freedom of being out of debt. So even though that's not sound business counsel, we have an emotional and spiritual idea to try to be out of debt as quickly.
Sounds like conviction.
Yeah, it sounds like conviction. And so that that was really early on. So then so Teresa and I decided to get married, and we didn't have a house on the farm. I wasn't making a living. I was working in town at the newspaper as a reporter, as a journalist. And so what are we going to do? Well, all your friends say, well, I'll back up a little bit. I got out of college, and of course, I needed a car. I didn't have a car in college. I was one of the few, seniors that didn't have a car. I don't need a car. I got friends that got cars. I'll use their cars and buy them a hamburger, once in a while to let them know I love them. And anyway, so I got out of college and didn't own a car. So then, I needed a car because I gotta get around. I gotta get on my own. And so a neighbor had an old car, and I bought it for $50. $50, okay. And I drove that car for 3 years. Teresa and I took our honeymoon in that car. Bless her heart, she had she was willing to be seen in that old car, okay? But it cost $50, and we drove that thing for 3 years. It threw a rod at 3 years, and I sold it for parts for $75. So that's why I like to buy cars. I buy them for 50, sell them for 75. Okay. I mean, we'd been married for 20 years before we spent a total of $10,000 on automobiles. I mean, I don't know too many. I mean, maybe horse and buggy people, but other than that, there aren't very many people that have been that frugal. And so when people say, what's the secret of your life? I say, well, I married a woman more frugal than I am. And she grew up on a farm. She knew how to can, how to sew, all these wonderful domestic skills. And so, and I know I'm sounding very sexist here, but I don't know how to sew. I don't know how to cook. So I needed somebody that could compliment me. And I knew how to do stuff outside, but I didn't know how to do stuff inside. So, she was a true, keeper of the home, and we made a great partnership. So, where are you going to live? So we remodeled the attic, and we had a big farmhouse here. My brother had already moved out, and my sister was in college. And so we remodeled the attic up in the attic, and that made our apartment. And, you can call it an attic. We called it our penthouse. And we lived very, very cheap. We lived on $300 a month If we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. We didn't have a TV. Still don't have a TV. We never went out to eat, or just never. And we didn't buy flashy clothes. We didn't need, any of those things. And all I'm saying is that this whole the temptation for consumerism, to keep up with the Joneses, keep up with the neighbors, have the latest this, the latest fashion, the latest gadget, the latest this. It's horrible. It's like slavery that enslaves you to this peer dependency and this celebrity consumerism, swim down the stream culture. And so, a lot of our success, yeah, we've been successful with the farm, but a lot of that has been enabled. It's been enabled by these other lifestyle decisions that we made that were completely countercultural, completely different than everybody, all of our friends, our college buddies, all that stuff. They were all, getting mortgages and going in debt to buy cars and buying fashionable pocketbooks and clothes and stuff like that. And we were protected. We protected from all that because we had a dream, we had a vision, and fortunately, we had enough conviction and commitment to stay focused on that thing. And so, so then kids come along. Well, you gotta get strollers and diapers, all that stuff. No, we use cloth diapers. We didn't buy any diapers. Cloth diapers. We had the diaper pail by the toilet, and you just go along. We never had a stroller. Who needs a stroller? You just carry them, and then as soon as they walk, and if you expect it, they don't whine. They get going. Toys. You don't need toys. Tupperware. What better toy is there for kids than cardboard boxes and Tupperware? And so the kids would, play with that. You know what I mean? You just don't need we never bought a single bottle of baby food ever. We had that little grinder thing, carried a diaper bag. We go somewhere to eat, or we sit down at the table. We put our food in there, grind it up, throw it on their plate, eat. And so what I'm getting at is in all these areas, it's considered backward, barbarian, uncultured. You just don't get it. What are you, some sort of a, minimalist? Yeah, I am a minimalist. I have no desire to be wealthy, to drive a sporty car, to any of that stuff. None of that stuff. What I want is true wealth. True wealth is not money. True wealth is a team that is loyal to me, that loves me, that has taken my mission and runs with it. Why? Because in some ways I make less than they do monetarily. And so they know I'm not aspiring to be wealthy or to be flashy. And so here, there's very, very almost no difference in the income between the CEO and the lowest person on the totem pole. And so that egalitarian view toward stuff garners a tremendous amount of respect and appreciation from the team because they know that I have their interests at heart, that I'm not trying to get a yacht, a bigger house, a flashier car, a better country club membership, those kinds of things that are the trappings of success. My brother put the nail on the head one time. He was here and he said, the reason that your neighbors and nobody respects you or wants to be like you around here is that your wealth is not in terms that they can see. It's not in fancy equipment. It's not in fancy buildings. It's not in pretty picket fences. It's in people. It's in skill. It's in mastery. Goodness, it's in the earthworms. We've built soil. The farm that used to only be able to support 10 cows, now 100 cows, 10 times. All right. That's wealth. Abundance is wealth. And fortunately, the IRS hasn't figured out how to tax earthworms yet. So the fact that we now have, billions of earthworms that we didn't have half a century ago, doesn't register on anybody's, wealth book. But to me, that's tremendous wealth. And then the wealth of stewardship, that I know that I'm pleasing God, who's saying, you've been a good steward of my stuff. Listen, this is all God's stuff. Yeah, I know the courthouse says we own it, but no, it's all God's stuff, right? And so the question is, what is his return on investment? What's his what's his stewardship of his stuff look like? And I would suggest that a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico, and infertile frogs and three-legged salamanders, that is not a stewardship return on investment that makes God happy. So I want to make God happy.
That's beautiful, and someone commented that as believers, we should be leading the leading pioneers in the environmental movement, being good stewards, being able to leave things better than we found them, at least not leave them worse than when we entered our environment. And I resonated with so much of what you were saying, because we really have invested a lot in ourselves. And I was actually trying to figure out how little we've spent on vehicles too, that we personally have not purchased new vehicles. And then when we've tried to buy used vehicles, we have one miracle van. It's like our farm truck van. And we paid cash for it, but we actually were sharing our vision of our life and with the people that we were selling it to, and they actually handed money back to us. So we've had times when we walk in, they reduce the price, and then on top of that, they give us money back. And to this day, that van is still not the market price of what we paid. We may be able to use that van 5 more years, and it's still worth what we paid for it, 3 years ago. But that is, like you said, having your heart in the right place, that money doesn't really define you, or the things that money is buying you doesn't really define you. And I think for the times that we live in, it's so important to understand that for the people that amass wealth and they have a lot of liquid assets, there's going to come a time where that's not going to be able to buy them what they want. And that's why I said to people, I really believe that skills and seeds, like heirloom seeds, are the currency of the future. The skills will help you to know what to buy and what to do with it. And also having that emotional intelligence and, like you were talking about, those convictions that will lead you to make decisions that are not going to enslave you into consumerism, but to invest to become better producers and to have a good return of your investment so that your family can flourish, your relationships can flourish, your health. My goodness, you were talking about not giving your children processed foods. I mean, you're investing actually in their health. And also children that are not so limited in eating specialty foods for children, then they have a wider palette of things that they will eat and they will enjoy. And so even though it may be, seem limited to people that are limited in their understanding maybe of the benefits, there are actually huge benefits to live a more natural lifestyle, a less consumeristic lifestyle. And like I said, if your resilience is inside, what I share with people is, some people store. I have nothing against storing a certain amount of food for the future, for being wise and prepared. But if you rely on that, what if you're on vacation and can't make it home? Or what if, like with the California wildfires, I heard of a lady who had a year's worth of storage of supplies of preparedness in her container, and that fire was so strong it consumed everything. So I heard of someone just recently that had like $20,000 worth of food stored in their basement, and accidentally their flooring, the heating in their flooring or something turned on, and it was over 90 for 3 weeks or something that they weren't there. And so if we put our faith and trust and security in physical things, when those things come, when those hardships come, it just really can derail someone. And that family in particular said that they were paralyzed, you know. And it's so important, like you shared, to just have the conviction that those things don't define you. And if you can measure your wealth by earthworms, or your versatility to not need disposable diapers and to not need packaged baby food and all of those things, and of course then you don't see a limit on how many children you can have, or how abundant your land can become. I really appreciate that you shared that, because I do also believe that wealth comes as your wisdom increases to value true wealth. So I'm reading a little bit of the comment. Someone said that so few people share this philosophy of wealth, but that is like, you know, true joy and happiness. Of course, we believe that the joy of the Lord is our strength, but living more simply will help us endure in times of trouble, and we will not be moved so easily because of consumeristic challenges.
Yeah, well, just think like right now. You know, right now, look at how many people are going, ballistic over the Ukraine-Russia situation, reducing the fertilizer and wheat, and of course, you know, we have lumber prices are through the roof. Well, on our farm, we don't buy anything from Russia or Ukraine. We don't even buy chemical fertilizer from anybody. And we have our own sawmill, so we mill our own lumber. And suddenly here we've got people coming to us. We with the increased price, suddenly our lumber has become more valuable, you know, in the community if somebody wants to buy it. And so on all these fronts that are putting people into a dither and a tailspin, we're not immune to it, but we're as close to immune as you can get, I feel like. And I mean, even in like take fuel, right? You know, fuel's going up in price. Well, the average farm in America, 50% of their expenses are fuel. 50% of their expenses are fuel. So if you take, so when I read that, I said, well, man, that doesn't seem like it's applicable to us. I wonder what ours is. So I dived into our audit, you know, said, well, how much of our expense is fuel? Only 5% of our expense is fuel, not 50, 5%. So we're at 5% compared to 50%. Now, do we still buy fuel? Yes. Do we want it as cheap as we can? Yes, of course we do. But what it means is that fuel could yet double or triple again, and we would still be surviving. And there's a certain, I don't know, affirmation, contentment, whatever, in knowing that you'll be the last guy standing. You hope by the time you're the last guy standing, somebody's figured out a way around the assault that made you the last guy standing, right? That's the idea. And so, yeah, I don't want to be cocky. I don't want to be, sound like, we like we don't have any difficulty, but at this stage of my life, having been condescended to by the experts and marginalized by officialdom and basically written out of the story by the the credentialed narrative. Okay, having lived in the ashes all my life, to suddenly be in a Cinderella position and being asked to come to the ball because we are more resilient. It's I'm not sure I know how to act. It's a strange place to be in, but it's a very affirming, encouraging spot to be in. That all those years of swimming against the tide, doing what was supposedly impossible, doing what nobody could do, doing what nobody should do, and now to suddenly see it kind of come to fruition where 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 we don't have to be as concerned, worried, frustrated about these exterior things. Boy, I'll tell you, it's a very enjoyable spot to be in.
I totally can relate. Jason and I have been married 24 years, and really until he read your books, he really felt like to be a believer and an environmentalist and wanting to do all these different things. He had never found anyone with a similar voice and even almost intact vocabulary. Sometimes I read to him your blogs and I say, wow, I mean, you guys live so far apart, but I hear him saying such similar things. But yeah, we really left, in our unconventional pattern of how we met and how we've lived our lives. We went off grid 10 years ago when, it wasn't a popular thing on YouTube. there were no YouTube channels that we were following. We didn't have a TV either. We just had this strong conviction that we had been married 13 years at the time, and we didn't have the skills that we wanted to be more resourceful and more resilient. And we were just felt so odd everywhere we went. It was whether we were with the permaculture circle, we felt a little outside
Right.
of that. If we were with the believers, we were outsiders there. And everywhere we go, we're just like an anomaly.
Yeah.
And
Right.
now, 2020 was the most affirming year of our lives. And actually, this you were making a comment about the cattle panel greenhouse. This was an idea that he had, and he started it right before that time, in 2020, spring of 2020. And that all of the world events that happened were really affirming, because suddenly we became relevant, and it's not about us, but it is incredibly rewarding and satisfying to know we were not crazy. God allowed us to have this conviction to prepare 10 years ahead. And we did it when it was crazy and we almost didn't make it. I mean, it was such a struggle relationally, financially, with our health, everything. I mean, everything got tested and tried, but we pressed, we moved forward. And it is really unbelievable to me. We actually are going to be speaking on this same platform in less than 2 weeks with you at the Exit and Build Summit. And that opportunity came because we did this, to be able to share our journey of the crazy, unthinkable, pioneering adventures that we went on, so that we could build that muscle and build that lighthouse for such a time as this. We built an ark for ourselves, but with a lighthouse to guide others in the way. And a big part of our message is that resilience begins inside. And I so appreciate that you're sharing, that you opened up to share these personal things about your life that gave you that extra muscle of resilience, to not be swayed in consumerism, to not be swayed in investing in consumeristic debt, that you used your finances to invest in yourselves, in your future, and so that you could become resilient. And, we actually have a private farm tour coming up. And to be honest, it makes me a little bit nervous. This is the first time we've ever agreed to have a farm tour. We've been very, very private. And like you said, everything here, before Jason read your books 12 years ago, he wanted to build everything like he had seen in Spain and in Mexico, just forts that could last hundreds of years for generations to come. And then he read your books and he was like, oh, I just needed to make it efficient and effective, and that's good enough. And so
that's right.
I basically call our property a research and development farm facility, because everything is like a prototype, and there's a lot of ugliness and a lot of chaos here, but a lot of wisdom and experiences that we've gained of what works and what doesn't work. We have a PhD on what doesn't work in Central Texas right now. But we, in 2020 was like our year that we turned the leaf of like, oh, we've tried 17 different combinations of gardening methods that don't work. Let's iterate to the next level and the next combination of what is working. And so I'm very grateful for this season of life where your family and our family are able to share and have a platform for such a time as this, that stewardship is really the best way. And that when we do put God first and we take care of his creation that we are a part of, right? Everything that we do to take care of his creation takes care of us.
Right. And, many of us who are actually looking at the times, and are concerned, about where a lot of things are headed. It's easy to become angry, frustrated, perplexed, and discouraged. And so the goal, I think, is to take that emotion, that anger, frustration, whatever, and discouragement, and take that emotion, and instead of being negative and against what we see, let's flip that on its head, turn all that energy and emotion into a positive, proactive solutions to wherever we are, so that as the culture becomes more hopeless and helpless, we can be beacons of hope and helpfulness in these times.
And I so agree with that. Actually, God put it on my heart. We'll be to do this thing. Like, we need one more project, but God put it on my heart to start a new initiative called Lighthouse Pioneers. Again, for people to build an ark for their family, to be established, to be prepared, and be able to be then a lighthouse. The original ark didn't have a lighthouse because it wasn't needed. Nobody else survived. But this season, this part of the story, we will need to be a lighthouse to show others the way, how they can have an ark for their family in body, soul, and spirit. And of course, we don't only believe that you prepare physically. There are so many other ways. And we've talked a lot about how to prepare emotionally on this broadcast, which is, I think, if your soul is settled, then your spirit can receive the truth. And I think that's really where the battle is at, is our soul, our mind, our will, and our emotions that are being swayed. And one of the examples that we used today was consumerism, being consumers or being producers. And it's like that battle, that tension between those things. And someone just shared that becoming producers, not consumers, makes us prepared. And it is, again, my heart for people to understand, I have nothing against you investing in things, in food and different things like that. But having, like Joel said, they use 5% of, fuel on their farm, which is unheard of, right? But, if you just, what if your life, you depended on like 5% of your life being a consumer of things, and the rest of the 90%, you were producing, so for example, you spend 5% of your income on seeds and, those really raw materials. And then the other 95%, you invest in skill sets, in infrastructure, and things that will help you multiply over and over, and be able to be resilient. And if that other 95% struggles, then you really only needed the 5% to survive, with needing income or the raw materials that you could barter for. One of the things that God allowed me to see, often when I'm counseling people or coaching people, these amazing revelations will come to me. And one of really the most powerful revelations of my life, I think I received recently, when I thought about Joseph and in the story of Joseph, thinking about what you said, Joel, that, basically it's being faithful in the little things, right? It's being faithful in managing things in a simplistic way, and to manage it like, if I can be, if I can make God happy with those $300 a month, if I'm a good steward. Well, in Joseph's life, he was known to be a good steward and a good manager of everything he did. Everything he did with joy and excellence, right? Well, he becomes, he gets dragged into this story with the Pharaoh, and he's entrusted with the grain. And, I'm not going to say that I'm God and I know all the details, because not everything is recorded. But what we're told is that he managed the grain and the storage, the production and storage of the grain, right? That was mainly one project, one thing, right? Just everything revolving around the preservation of the grain, the storage of the grain, the production of the grain. Grain, one thing. But in the end of the story, he had everything, more than enough. And what I want people to know for such a time as this is that everybody's conviction of what they need to do, everybody's calling may be different, but you be faithful with if it's just grain, if it's that one thing, if it's having a seed library for your family and your community, be faithful and learn how to take care of that one thing. And then when hard times come, because you're faithful with that one thing, people will come from all over. As far as we know, there was no one that didn't hear about Egypt having grain. They came and they gave everything they had, including themselves, to pawn their livelihood, their everything, in exchange for grain. So it's like, what has God entrusted you with? Like, what is that one skill or that one project that God's put in your heart? Like Joel said, that doesn't look like what everybody else is doing. Pioneering is not about looking like the homesteader next door or like the farmer from 10 years ago or whatever it looks like on Pinterest or on TV or on YouTube. It's whatever God requires of you. That right there is the standard. But if we have that, and if we are faithful with that little one project and we do it well, it may look like craziness to other people. It may have looked like craziness to Egypt, that all of this effort was being invested in the grain. I mean, they hadn't had a famine like that before. They had plenty and then they had a famine. So it didn't seem thinkable. Again, with the rain and Noah, it didn't seem thinkable that a flood would come and destroy. It doesn't seem like some of the things that we feel like we're preparing for are realistic expectations. But we know the truth, and we know the truth that in the revelations that God has given us, that, and what do you have to lose if you prepare for some catastrophic event,
Right.
and it doesn't happen in your lifetime, but all your community around you has experienced preparedness, your children or your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, they will be more resilient by your example, having been exposed and having the memory of what it looked like to do that. So to me, in my opinion, living like what Joel expressed, to be more minimalist, to be more simplistic, to have that resilience in not needing so much, to be more producers than consumers, that will help you thrive, because just life happens. Things in life happens, and you're not going to be able to crash and burn every single time that something comes up, because you haven't set yourself up to be so dependent. So
Right.
I really appreciate this conversation, Joel. Is there anything, any last thing that you want to leave people with as they're considering either exiting what they're doing, the society that they have lived in, either as your parents did, just quit and move to another country, or come back to a different state that you're from, or just moving ahead with the next step of what they've been called to? What is some wisdom for people to just get to that next step and to not stop and let that momentum die?
Yeah, I think the key is the one thing. When we have this whole, we love to plan, right? And we're told to do, business plans and spreadsheets and all this stuff. And I'm a big believer that 10 years will be the consummation of each day leading up to those 10 years. And a lot of times when you try to think out there too far in the future, yeah, I mean, I think it's good to have vision. I mean, out there, absolutely have vision out there, but in general, trying to lay it out too specifically um, it becomes intimidating, because it's real hard to get from here to there. And so, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so how do you start a journey, with the first step? And those are all, excuse me, those are all trite, but they're all true. That's why we use them, because they are true. And so, Teresa and I, we never set out to rent land and have a team this size and do what we're doing. Our dream was we just wanted to farm full time. That was a very simple mission statement: farm full time. I mean, it's not a very long sentence, and but it was in the crucible of making that happen. That our success, spawned a bunch of other threads and themes and things that we didn't think about. Stephen Covey writes about this in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where he has these spheres of influence, things that you have influence over, and then out here, things that you don't have any influence over. And his point is that if you spend all of your time in your sphere of influence, the influence you have becomes bigger. The problem is most of us, we don't want to spend time in our sphere of influence because that's too personal. You mean I have to do something? I have to change? You mean I'm responsible? And so what we like to do is spend all our time outside of our sphere of influence, writing letters, campaigning, carrying signs, carrying on about things that we can't do a single thing about. You and I can't do a single thing about the Fed. We can't do anything about inflation. We can't do anything about Biden. We can't do anything about Trump. We can't do anything about Ukraine. I mean, but now there are some people who can. That's their sphere of influence. Most of us can't. So the more we focus our attention on things that we can do something about, then what happens is we become salt and light in the earth because we've been successful with something small. And that staying within that sphere of influence then actually in the big scheme of things, it actually increases our reach beyond if we spin our wheels out here reaching for things that are beyond our influence and what's near to us crashes and burns. So put your attention on the stuff that's close. Itemize 1 or 2 things that you can do today. Maybe it's just make a meal from scratch. Maybe it's just not buying Legos or Eggos, but actually getting an egg and frying it up for breakfast. For you, that might be a big deal. That might be pioneering for you. Okay. But if that's what it is, that's your step. And you actually just take those incrementally, and don't worry about 10 years from now. 10 years will take care of itself if you take care of today.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Joel. I appreciate, again, all of your generous time and personal sharing of your wisdom that can help all of those who are watching to get more grounded really in their soul, what they need to be really thinking about and taking inventory of. And I will attest that when you live more simply, like when we moved out here 10 years ago to pioneer homesteading off the grid, we had never even been camping. I didn't know how to start a fire. This was completely outside of our realm of influence or experience or skill sets, but we had the conviction that we had to figure out now, because if we waited until it was critical, it would be too late. And we basically had our personal simulation of what, having a apocalypse, our own personal apocalypse. And one thing that I found is you can't run from yourself. If you're really, if you're living tiny, if you are growing your own food, if you are having to partner with your spouse doing things, you're really going to have to figure it out to survive. And you can't just run away, because we are generally in this society so fragmented that people are just split up everywhere, and you think things are working, and then you come together like, family vacations or family reunions. You come back together and it's like, oh, okay, there's a lot that we need to work on here, but then people just disperse back up. And so I appreciate you bringing that wisdom, that working on yourself and your sphere of influence. It's really the most important way to be faithful, and then you can multiply from there. Be like you said, the genetic stock gets better, the things that you're multiplying gets better. Well, thank you so much, Joel, and If you have no other things that come up, I will just go ahead and wrap up this broadcast with a blessing for everyone who's watching. May the Lord bless you and keep you, shine his face towards you, be gracious unto you, turn his countenance towards you, and give you shalom peace.
Amen.
Thank you.